I want to welcome our panelists, starting from furthest away from me from your left, Leonard Rosenthal from Adobe, Henry Sal Jr. from CSI, and Patrick Lowe from Datalogics. Today, we are going to talk about privacy, the GDPR, and we're going to talk about document technology. So, technical strategies for managing content, managing privacy of content, of PII, of confidential and other information in the context of today's requirements for protecting information. Leonard, do you have any thoughts to kick us off on that?
It sounds like a really good idea, Matt. I fully support the direction you're suggesting.
Coach Greg Popovich.
So, why do we need to think about this? I mean, can't we just manage information in the ways that we always have? Can't we just let information, can't we just protect it the ways that we always have, just through obscurity or hoping that people won't find it, or just thinking that everybody will be a good citizen and not leak databases of all our credit card numbers off the internet? I mean, why do we need to think about this?
Well, I think I think one of them is the four letters you have up at the top of that slide, just as an example, GDPR. For those of you who don't know, it's a European regulation around privacy. Technically, the US doesn't care, South America doesn't care, Australia doesn't care. It's a European norm, but anybody doing business with the Europeans, should be everybody, start to care because it then becomes relevant to you. And I think that, we talked about this yesterday at various times as well, which is this idea of mandates. So if your customers are mandated by the laws of their country to do something, whatever it is, GDPR, use PDF or PDFA, then they're going to come to you as a vendor and request that as a feature, as a requirement of the software that they buy, or license, or subscribe to, or whatever your purchasing model might be. So, I think certainly in one aspect it's because the customers are asking for it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll approach this from a government perspective. Most of our clients are local and county, state governments, and in the early days, to commit identity theft, you actually had to go down to their offices and pull documents and look for stuff. We're publishing documents on the internet to essentially get people out of their offices, essentially stop that age. One of our consultants, Frank Gastineau, actually gets him to speak and say he can break somebody's identity in about 30 seconds just using Google search on the general internet. And in fact, I think there was a very interesting case study on the director of the CIA had his identity stolen off of some website. And in fact, a lot of our clients, when they call us, are usually last moment crises. Austin, Texas called us because Michael Dell's identity was found on social security numbers off of his line records off of the website. A couple of big shots in New York off of the website. Most of the government stuff is line records, mortgages, deeds, things of that nature when you do a financial transaction. They're getting posted online now to make it easier for title companies to search, but it's also very easy for people to do identity theft anyway. So as governments try to be more proactive, it's necessary to get rid of the PII off the documents before they hit the websites.
So what I'm hearing is, just like accessibility that we talked about yesterday, it's we care to avoid these. Would that be accurate, Patrick? Or is there more to it?
I think so. I mean, as a European citizen, I'm kind of intrigued by this idea of I have the right to be forgotten, that I have the right to ask this company that's amassed this data about me and ask them, forget about me. Forget that we've ever had any interaction with each other and that I don't exist to you anymore. That's something that's fairly new to the world, and it's not something that we used to be able to do before, where information is just viewed as if you're a hoarder of information.
Can I add something to that? Sure. There is no ROI on redaction processing. It costs money by the software. It's going to take you time to validate documents that the software is not going to be able to process. However, most of the laws in the U.S. make it the owner, custodian of the record, is responsible, and they can be sued, and so on and so forth. And the standard joke among our state customers are the ROI is not return on investment, it's the risk of incarceration. So if they let something go out the door, it's actually the filer's responsibility to remove it. But there's still no state legislations or passing laws that say the custodian of record is responsible for making sure that what gets submitted doesn't have it on there. A lot of the states that we deal with have laws that have been saying that you cannot submit documents for the past 10 years. Last year, the state of Florida had about 35 million documents that had social banknotes and credit cards on them after they passed a law 15 years ago saying that you should not put these on your documents. They did process 200 million documents, but it's still 15-20% of documents coming in to the government or containing privacy information.
Sorry,
Gentlemen,
thank you. We're talking a lot about like privacy in terms of protecting privacy here. One of the main things of GDPR is that a data subject can request from a controller to receive all the data that has been collected on them, and it says in a commonly used machine readable format. So, I mean, for me, this is PDF, right? And imagine if that person's disabled. They have the same right under the GDPR, so they would need to be able to receive it in a format that they could actually also read as well. So to me, this is, as much as we can talk about protecting privacy, GDPR is also about the management of the content of the stuff you've collected, because as a lawyer, there's a ton of exceptions to get around not collecting data, even in GDPR. There's like 7 different reasons. The most common one is consent that people have. So every time you're on a website and you click I accept cookies in the privacy policy, you're getting past most of the GDPR. And then there's this massive section of GDPR that just hasn't been litigated, and this is the whole scale balancing act between like whether you have a right to collect this for your business purposes versus the balancing of the protection of the individual's right to not to be forgotten or not have the data collected. So I think in this case, like practically what this is saying is maybe just an image PDF or a bitmap PDF of that data is not complying with GDPR there. So you would actually need a certain type of PDF to be able to even deliver it to them. Just a thought.
Well, it's an interesting thought, John, and I think that, to what you pointed out in the middle, it hasn't been litigated yet.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, certainly is someone who requires accessible material is delivered non-accessible material, that may well come up. But, I'm not aware that it's happened yet. In fact, I'm sure it's not happened yet, and we'll see, but it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Okay, towards the front here.
Yeah, so when I was hearing the last talk and this one, I think we're missing maybe an important lesson. One of the reasons I think that they printed a redacted document and then rescanned it is just last January, Paul Manafort's lawyers got into trouble because they thought they redacted something, but they turned out didn't. And you could copy the text out because it was just masked.
No, but they knew better than that. And the reason I know that they knew better is that they know that they used professional redaction software.
Well, and that may be true, but I think there's something to be said when I see these user interfaces for the products we're using. When obscuring that text, how do I know as an end user that that really worked? Printing it and then rescanning it will guarantee me that it worked, but otherwise I have to somehow know either that I have certified software or, do my own testing, and I may not be equipped to do that.
Yeah, you have to trust your redaction vendor to make sure that not only do they redact the image layer, but they navigate the cause tree, make sure they examine every single object on it, get rid of all the metadata, or they run the document from scratch and give them the PDF document.
Right.
An interesting case is anybody from JP Morgan Chase in the audience. JP Morgan Chase was sued $600 million by the federal government a few years ago when all the mortgage things were failing because they were using outside attorneys to submit all the foreclosure documents. And the outside attorneys did nothing more than Microsoft Word, put a border or an object over the text to be redacted. I'll say it this way. Put a text over the thing to be redacted, and made a PDF file. They submitted it to Pacer, which is the federal court system. And then Pacer just put the PDFs, and they're not paying attention to what was going on. Then people would get the PDFs, and they bring them to Acrobat, and they just get rid of the mess, and they find all the redacted data. And so, because even though it was the attorney working for JP Morgan, JP had the biggest pockets, the Fed sued them. Not only did they sue them, but they made them pay $20 million to retrieve all the documents off the Pacer system, because Pacer is not a free system to access documents, and an insult to injury. They made it the pay to read all the documents, just based upon what you said earlier. How I know this is because they hired us to fix it wrong.
We have a comment here. Other comments, questions for the panel?
Sorry, I'll just add again, you have to think of the user and educate the user. My point here being that they might have used professional redaction service, but who made that decision? Who ultimately was the person doing it? I know in a law firm, when I was in the law firm setting, the idea of using Acrobat to redact things was like, woo, magic, to most of the attorneys.
We like to think that, yes.
I'm sure if you're dealing with attorneys, you know this. There's a lot of attorneys that you get set in their ways. They're still writing on yellow legal pads because that's the way they do it. They're still tracking hours on yellow legal pads because that's the way they've done it. So there's an education gap again. I hate to say it, to ultimately say, hey, no, there are differences, and this is the difference. This is why you need to use this when you're using an electronic document.
And you're even really at the very technical level of what's going on within the PDF. Some of the simple questions are, in a state that has, 60 counties, and your requirement is to redact a social, 60 counties have different ideas of what a social is. It could be a federal tax ID number, it could be a social that has the first four digits redacted. So there's a lot of discrepancies in terms of what the actual PII standards is that varies based upon organization that's doing it. And that's the same for GDPR in terms of how they're going to interpret it. Our interest that no one's even asked for so far is how accurate is this stuff, right? Without even reviewing. Machine print, as I mentioned earlier, OSR is about 90-95% accurate. That's not a big deal. The question is, what happens when you get at the handprint? Cursive script on a document that's not only horizontal, but it's vertical in nature. So you better make sure that your solution not just does OCR, but does some type of image-based analysis to make sure there is no handprint. Because if you're going to have handprint on your documents, if you want to have 100% redaction accuracy, then you're going to have to look at 100% of your documents, which nobody in the right mind is ever going to do. So there's technical challenges, not just related to, hey, it's a PDF, but it's how the information is present on the PDF. Is it handprint? Is it cursive script? And then in terms of how do you find data, the technical challenges are, we talked about regular expressions earlier. So sometimes you write regular expressions to find keywords, and you write regular expressions to find key values. So what do you search for first? You search for the keyword, you search for the key value. You search forward, you search backward, where the OCR is coming in. So there's a lot of technical challenges that lead up to a high-quality redaction solution that and when I say high quality, in our processing, if we process complex documents, we say that we're going to be 99.95% accurate if you follow our process. And our process kicks out documents that have to be looked up by humans. But there's a lot of software work that goes into that equation in terms of just finding the data that you have to redact. Forget about what you do with the PDF after the fact. Just can you actually find what you're looking for? So you have to find what you're looking for. You have to deal with customers that change their mind all the time in terms of what is something to be redacted. And then you have to deal with what's going to document out.
Absolutely. The other thing, and actually it's interesting the way you phrase some of that, and goes to some other things we talked about during this conference, which is where do we draw the lines between a requirement, something we want to, somebody used the word, validated or certified process versus benefit. And there are a number of vendors in this room, who actually compete against each other. I have the better redaction tool. No, I have the better redaction tool, or pick your favorite feature of the product. Where do you draw that line between, the best interest of users, one way or the other, and being able to put money on, in your pocket and food on your table?
Last thing I'm going to say in terms of the technology. Our early technology was based on regular expressions, which were nice. They covered PII, PCI, and PHI, well-defined discrete fields. When you get into complex redactions such as trade secrets, health information, things like that nature, discrete fields and regular expressions won't work. As I said, we've been doing redaction for 15 years. In the past 4 years, we added extraction on. We changed all our stuff over to AI. And the reason being is not only do you get the PII and the PCI, but you have individual customers who want to redact their own thing. And those customers don't want to write regular expressions. They don't want to pay you to write regular expressions. So if you have advanced tools, you can simply point and click the data, and the system figures out how to find it and redact it in the future. So that's my 2 cents on how to deal with complex redaction.
Another question in the back here, then that's it.
Thanks. So I mean, that sounds great, the AI thing, but I think it really just gets back to what you were saying before about trust. I mean, if you're an FBI agent, you want to be the guy who submitted the unredacted Mueller report just because you happen to fall in the 3-9 zone where this wasn't adequate. I think people are always going to, redaction needs to be absolutely certain, and unless they have absolute certainty, they're not going to go with it.
There have been a lot of bad experiences with redaction vendors, with people buying software, not knowing what it actually does with documents. That's based upon the salesperson being maybe not correct, and the recipient not knowing what to ask for. So the standard joke that I have is, what's the difference between a car salesman and a software salesman? A car salesman knows when he's lying.
I think the other piece that it's hard to follow that joke. It's good. Take that back to myself. I think part of the problem, to be honest, and again, redaction is just a great example of this, but I think it applies to anything that we've talked about, which is what really is perfect redaction or true redaction or certifiable redaction or anything like that. And the thing is, if you would ask that question 15 years ago when Henry Ross or other people started with PDF-based redaction, or 5 years ago, or last week, you would get different answers. The playing field has changed. It's redaction, and again, any feature has varied over time. And I think that, it's an interesting question. I don't know how you prove it, to the question you ask. It's not that you shouldn't, not that it's not an appropriate question to ask. I'm saying, just as a software person, as a vendor, I don't know how you prove it other than say, take my word for it,
Patrick, anything you want to add? Don't worry, we'll let you redact it later. I'll let it.
No, I'm just what's unique about GDPR in one sense is that it kind of is the same sort of idea of redaction, but instead of hiding it from others, stuff that you want to keep for yourself, you're basically taking information that you have and hiding it from yourself rather than from somebody else. And I think that's a slightly different model than the legal model that Drew's been working with for the past 15 years. So I think it might be some of the same tools, but it might be somewhat different. It'll be interesting to see what comes out.
GDPR is a little bit more interesting. What we're finding out from the European companies is not simple redaction. There's usually, if I have a document, then I have 3 fields over here that are equal to these values. I want to redact this field on this other document. So there's a lot of translation and complexity that's not just related to what's on the page or what's in the document, it's what's related to this transaction that affects these other bits. So there has to be some transformation layer on top of this regular expressions.
Joseph, that's all true. But one of the things that for GDPR is very interesting is when you think about if you're a document repository, so if you're whether you're a content management system or you're something like OneDrive or Dropbox, or even just a corporate repository, those requirements, if somebody says, take out all the information you know about me, that only applies to their storage. You are not obligated, for example, to go through every other 100,000 million users you have and find every one of the documents where they're mentioned. Because that would be inappropriate. You don't have the right, that person does not have the right to be removed from somebody else's repository, only from theirs. So it really is a very small box, and you have to consider that if you're involved in the services world. Has a lot of other ramifications there as well.
So I'm going to add on to Leonard's stuff. A very funny thing that happened to the United States was when they first came out. 8 years. When they first came out with redaction laws, they made it so that the consumer had to identify the document, the page, the paragraph, and the sentence they wanted information redacted off of. So essentially, it's obscurity. There's no one in the world who's going to know that this county has their document and it's this page and stuff like that. So they tried to get away with that, and then they finally made it so that on the receipt, the custodian had to deal with it. And that brings up another issue, and that is, forget about the stuff coming in day forward. When you pass these laws, we have customers that have 250, 400 million document repositories. What are they doing with that? Do they redact everything going back? They redact it when it needs to be presented. So there's a bunch of other questions you have to answer there too, not just what's coming in your door, but what's in your historical repositories. And then the next question becomes, how do you prove the quality of your redaction on 400 million documents? No one's going to see about 400 million. You take statistical subsets based upon document type, and you make sure that they qualify, and then anything that falls outside of that qualification boundary, then it gets looked up by humans. So there's ways to handle both large volume repositories.
Great points.
Front here.
Kenny Swope, Boeing. So just following on that thread a little bit, it's curious to me, this conversation, because I think about the experience of an industry that's heavily regulated, and it has to deliver software that proves beyond a reasonable doubt, matter of fact, proves with certainty, to 3 nines, 4 nines type quality, the traceability and the provenance of data, and the methods that we have to go through as an industry, and I talk about aerospace, to prove that what was designed was built, and what was built was serviced. And that's a life cycle view. And so that's forced the aerospace industry to create perhaps a unique ecosystem, but I doubt it. I think it has parallels of demonstrating and improving the traceability of data. And so I'm curious if we were to view this as an industry segment, and I think it is, it's a very big one, is this industry segment prepared for the onslaught of regulatory requirement that's going to, I'll call, apply the concepts of aviation safety to information safety? And where do you think you're going? Because GDPR, I think, is just the first step.
So I think one of the things that there's a difference, in my mind at least, and you said it, which is you talk about the creation, the building, and then certification of an aircraft.
Right.
And to be honest, certifying creation is actually very simple. But let me think of redaction, which is what we're talking about in this particular instance, is if somebody came to Boeing and said, well, I want you to remove every screw of type 37G on your aircraft. How do you prove to this person that you have removed every one of those screws? And not only the ones that were in the original specification, but the ones that the repair people put in to jury rig something over here because they had to fix it to get a plane off on some arbitrary Sunday. And that really is the problem, is we're not talking about, the first part is easy. But here we're dealing with, a very different problem that nobody that I'm aware of has ever tried to regulate or certify. And that's what, in my mind, makes it a very different and a very hard problem.
Although the way you put it, it sounds very much like the Boolean problem. How do you prove the negative? Can you? Not really.
Okay, so the answer is, there are no rules and laws right now. It's the Wild West. It's usually a bake-off. What happens is, if you're a large organization, you go out for an RFP, and we try to educate large organizations by telling them that do not give sample sets to vendors that they can process with humans in the time frame that you allocate for their processing. You want to make sure that it's solely software processed. You give them more documents and there's humans available to validate. And then you have your humans look at the results in detail. And then you pick a score, and then based upon your value of price versus accuracy, you decide which vendor. That's usually what happens on large deals that are just like figures.
No, in the back, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, again, I think GDPR is a law. It's been adopted by many of the EU member states already. And I think the thing that you run into with GDPR is, let's say I'm an EU member citizen, I come to the US for a holiday, I access your website, you collect some data, I then go back to the EU, you are still subject to the GDPR of that country, even though I access the data in America. So if you contact me at all, if you continue to collect data from me after I've been back in the EU, you're subject to it, which is why all these multinational companies have had to pay attention to it. I don't think the point of GDPR, though, is to look back and punish past deeds. I think they're more trying to push people forward and really punish the big tech companies that, after it was in place, have done nothing in some ways to do that. So I actually think this, as much as it is about, don't get me wrong, redaction and the actual aftermath of it, I also think it really is pushing the process and the actual current data collection that is going on. The other point I would like to make is, a lot of people are talking about just about customers. A lot of this applies just to employees as well. So it's not just something you do for your customers, but if you have EU employees and an employee wants to be forgotten, you have to go back in and do it and take away that information. So I really think the whole point of it is really, I mean, the US did it to put privacy policies on applications and stuff. It's the same type of momentum trend. They're just trying to, and to me this only helps PDF, obviously. This means more people are going to pay attention to how they're actually collecting and managing data. Because if you can't read it or you don't know how it's being collected and how it all, like, it becomes onerous, like Duff said, to go back after the fact and try to do anything with it.
Thoughts on that?
I mean, maybe.
Redaction is only a small piece of GDPR.
Okay, European.
I mean, I was just, we were obliged, I mean, we are a German company, so we were obliged to define rules according to GDPR. And you're right, so it affects customer data as well as employee data. So what we have to do is effectively define processes, how we deal with any kind of personal data, and then we have to define these processes. We have to be prepared to, if somebody asks for our procedures, our defined procedures, we have to be able to give them, to show them to them, and to show where the data actually is, and we have to be prepared, and we have to define processes, how we are able to delete any data if somebody asks us to do so. That is GDPR.
So we've got time for one or two more questions. We're going to come over to this side of the room. Go ahead.
I mean, just one of the things I'm wondering, thoughts about this, the European rules from panels, but it seems ironically from this that in order to better preserve privacy, it means that you're going to have to do even more aggressive indexing of all that private information so that you can then get rid of it fast.
You have to classify it, yeah.
And so I was just wondering, I mean, what do you see as the implications of all of that?
More work. Job security.
Other implications?
Yeah, so what we're telling our clients to use is if you're spending money on redaction, don't get it for free. Use the same technology for extraction, automate your processes, redaction falls out of it at the same time. So that the time-consuming validation efforts that are going on to make sure the data is redacted, yeah, you're going to invest those, but the same technology will find the data to redact, you can find the data to extract, and then you can use it to automate your process and save time that way.
All right, I think we got time for one or two more in the back here.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think you made a good point. And I was going to say that in the future, I think as we look towards having technology that's true property, providing true redaction, I mean, not just obscuring the content or things like that, it will have to go hand in hand with having a technology that can also understand documents and understand, whether it's handwriting, an image, or whatever it is, and be able to properly automate, like having automated and intelligent extraction of those documents so that we can actually show what information was redacted or taken out or deleted out of the content, not just sort of let companies trust, vendors, but having sort of proof alongside of that. So maybe as we go towards the future, we have to see this as a problem that's connected to AI and document understanding.
Thank you.
So I actually have a question. So many tools have redaction functionality, but they also often have other functionality that ranges in names and things like sanitize, remove hidden data. Don't we make this more complex by giving all these different names to different things and not necessarily being consistent between different products? Comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. All vendors are looking for somebody to distinguish their technology from somebody else's. Bottom line comes down to how fast can you process, how accurate you are, and how much is it going to cost you.
I explained the concept of sanitization, for example.
I can explain as part of it. I mean, those are terms that were established by other industry. Redaction has been around long before PDF and long before digital documents. The term sanitization as it applies to PDF was actually chosen by the government, the U.S., certain agencies within the U.S. government who decided that that's the process, what they want to call the process of removing all of that hidden stuff. That's why that's why we chose that word, is that when they came to us and said, put this in Acrobat, that's what they started calling it. We said, okay, if that's how you know it, then that's what we'll call it. I mean, it wasn't like we even chose it. So we just sort of adopted what the industry had already called it, and,
But I guess my point was about the UX experience, thinking about the user now, because that was, I don't know how many years ago, but
Yeah.
obviously a number. So what do you think, is that a good thing we've done? Maybe reduction should include sanitization?
You know what, it's interesting. The only reason I can tell you it doesn't, I mean, the reason we made it, I can give you the history for us, I can't speak for anyone else. The reason it's separate in Acrobat is because they were completely separate requirements. The people who wanted sanitization didn't want redaction, people who wanted redaction didn't want sanitization. We were the ones who actually decided to bring the two together and give the user the option after you redact, would you also like us to sanitize? So it was two completely separate customer bases who wanted two completely separate things. So we just brought them together because we thought it made sense, but but some users don't. I don't know if you find the same thing.
And I agree with you.
Don't
Well, I think we're just about out of time.
You're the same
I'm
thing?
just going to add to that, don't we have a responsibility with vendors to actually educate the market as to what is, what is redaction, what is sanitization, instead of confusing customers and,
Yes, but I think we absolutely have, the responsibility to educate on what is there. I don't necessarily know that we have the responsibility to change their way of thinking. And I think there's you can go either way, but, it depends on who it is and where they are. Yes,
Should we clarify, in legal terms, when you redact something, you have a reason for redacting it. And so ultimately, things like claiming privilege would be a reason you would want something redacted. So even if I knew what was there and was privileged information, it does me no good in court. Whereas sanitization is obviously about removing metadata and ultimately the underlying portion of it, correct?
No,
Sorry.
it's not. Sanity, but that's the thing. And again, the definition as defined by the U.S. government for sanitization is removing, and I'm going to use the term in quotes and tell me if you disagree with this, hidden information. It applies to anything that a human that cannot visibly detect.
Yeah, and then also to confuse your issue further, if you know in court documents, you don't have to just worry about redaction, but the concept of obfuscation, so that you want to keep the reading sequence in order so that when you have screen readers for the disabled, you want to know instead of Henry Sal as the victim, it's victim on here, victim on here, victim on here. So there's another layer that goes on. It's not just redaction sanitation, it's redaction sanitation, obfuscation as well.
I guess my point
Thank
being
you.
that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Out of time. I'm terribly sorry. But I do want to thank Leonard. I want to thank you, Henry, and I want to thank you, Patrick, for illuminating insights. And I want to thank everybody for your insights and your questions and your feedback. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, panel.